Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I am your host, Christian apologist Brian Keith Bowen, and welcome also to the Genesis series, a series I've been having for a while. It's a commentary series on Genesis 1 through 11, but I do a textual analysis and then I back up and I do a bunch of topological videos. Today, we are going to be discussing the fossil evidence with Dr. Jerry Bergman. He's taught on a number of things. He's an expert on anatomy, but he's also taught on anthropology and a bunch of other subjects, including anatomy and genetics and so forth. And today, he's going to be discussing with us, and he's also written on the subject matter, by the way, of the fossil evidence. I got his book right here, Fossil Forensics. He's also written lots of other topics, including on ape as ancestors, that's believed by evolutionists, and he's written numerous books on the subject matter of evolution. And he's going to be joining us today on this channel to discuss Australopithecines, particularly Lucy, but also several others. We're going to be talking about several others. We're talking about Littlefoot, Dikika Child, and so forth. We're going to be discussing a lot of them. We're going to be discussing Neanderthals. We're going to be talking about a lot of these different various fossil finds and discussing whether or not if they're related to us, what goes into it. Primate fossils. We're going to be talking about the mixture of human and ape fossils that sometimes occur in some of these fossil finds and so forth. We're going to be discussing a lot of these. We're going to be discussing some hoaxes like Piltdown Man, Haeckel's Embryos, and so forth. So it's going to be really fun. We go really deep into it, and so we end up having a lot to cover. So without further ado, let's dive in. I'm here today with Dr. Jerry Bergman, who has quite a bit of degrees. I'll go over that in a second. But we're here today discussing the fossil evidence regarding like Australopithecines, Lucy, Neanderthals. So we have got a lot to go over. And I know that Dr. Bergman has a presentation he wants to present. And then after that, we're going to ask a lot of questions concerning this. And so we're going to be focusing mostly on the fossil evidence, but we're also going to be talking about some forgeries and so forth. But before we dive into that, I do want to do an introduction of Dr. Bergman. I've got his book here on fossil forensics. I actually looked for Dr. Bergman. I actually looked for your book on ape and ancestor. I can't find it anywhere. Is it out of print or something?
Yeah, it's out. I can send you a copy if you give me your address. But it's if you look at adall.com, you should be able to find it. It was on Amazon, but we're revising it a little bit, and so but I have plenty of copies. So
okay. I'll send you my address via email. And so you can be able to send me that. I appreciate it, because I actually wanted to have that book ready for this, but I couldn't find any available copies. All right, Dr. Bergman, I'm using your bio from the your book. Dr. Bergman has taught biology, anthropology, geology, anatomy, and other courses at the college level for over 40 years. Let me get my glasses on. My reading glasses, easy to see with. All right, for 40 years. He is currently an adjunct associate professor of the University of Toledo Medical College. Is that true? Still true?
no, I retired.
Okay. It was true when you wrote this book.
Yeah.
All right. He has 9 earned degrees, including a doctorate from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, a member of Mensa,
Mensa, yeah.
MENSA, listed in Who's Who in the Midwest and Who's Who in Theology and Science. He has over 950 publications in both scholarly and popular science journals and has written 32 books and monographs. Dr. Bergman's work has been translated into 12 languages, including French, German, Italian, Spanish, Danish, Polish, and Swedish. Among his many books is a monograph on the creation-evolution controversy published by Phi Delta Kappa, the Honor Society in Education, and a college textbook on evaluation. And he has contributed chapters to numerous others. Other books include Slaughter of the Descendants, The Dark Side of Darwinism, Hitler, and the Darwinian Worldview, and the forthcoming Darwin's Blunders, Frauds, and Forgeries, which is currently out, by the way. At the time of this book, you were still working on that, right?
Right.
All right. All available on Amazon. And it goes further and says you presented 100 scientific papers at professional meetings. So I was curious, what are those 9 degrees that you got?
Well, in biochemistry, I have a degree in biochemistry and biology and measurement and evaluation, and in health, several degrees from medical school in the health science area. So that's my background. Is primarily I taught anatomy at the medical school, and taught anatomy at another college for many years. So human anatomy is my focus. But I also taught quite a wide variety of courses.
Including in anthropology, right?
Right. Also taught anthropology for 6-7 years, I guess.
Right. Awesome. And of course, today we are going to be discussing the subject matter of anthropology, specifically in reference to fossils. So without further ado, you have a presentation, correct?
Yeah, let me...
All right. You should be able to share your screen without any problems.
You should be able to. Okay, I can see it now. Can you see it in your end?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, there it goes. Yes.
Yeah, okay,
awesome.
Okay, good.
All right. Now we're in business. All right, go ahead and start, Dr. Bergman.
Okay, here we go. Okay, apes as ancestors. This focuses on Lucy, but a lot of the comments refer to other discoveries as well. And Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And that's from the King James Version. A lot of people prefer that, so I just use it. And pretty clear message. And many other scriptures, of course, say the same thing. Evolution, you can see apes as ancestors, my book, which was about 800 pages, but they printed it in 8.5 by 11, so it's much larger than most books I've done. And Christians today are debating this, although the facts are pretty clear. The Search for the Historical Adam, this is in a magazine called Christianity Today, and they basically are talking about some, unfortunately too many, accept the evolutionary worldview, and as a result they had to revise the teachings, try to revise the teachings. And this is a problem for me because the evidence is pretty clear against human evolution. I've written 3 books on this now and dozens of papers, and it's pretty clear that there's no valid evidence for human evolution. And when we look at where people believe on this, total population, about less than half accept evolution. And ironically, 8% of Jehovah's Witnesses accept evolution, and the rest accept the creation worldview. Mormons, 22% accept evolution. Evangelical Protestants, 24. Historical Black, 38. Muslim, 45. Mainline Protestant, the Methodists, and the Lutherans and so on. Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, 54% accept evolution, so less than half accept the creation worldview. Catholic, 58% accept evolution. Unaffiliated, which we expect, a high percent, of course, unaffiliated accept the evolutionary worldview. Jewish, Hindu, and Buddhist, the vast majority accept the evolutionary worldview. So it depends heavily upon your religion. Most of the churches that I do presentations, done about 600 presentations, are evangelical Protestant. So even there, 24% accept the evolution worldview and reject creation worldview. And this is an example of drawings which are made. And one must stress that these are artists' renditions. And we start out with an ape in the corner here. And then we end up with slow changes till we get to modern man. And Lucy is the one we'll focus on today, which is one of many claims. Lucy is the most prominent, the most well-known, the most publicized, and evolutionists see this as the most well-documented example of human evolution. Get some water in here. And there we go. This is in a museum. And you can see as we go through this that they've taken a huge amount of artistic license in doing this mannequin here. You can see on the front view and the side view. Another you can see picture from a science magazine. You can see how Lucy has many human traits, but also many ape traits. And this is commonly what is seen. And here you can see, get this out of the way. I'm not sure if you can see this whole thing, but there's another picture of Lucy. One thing you notice that, and they don't know whether Lucy was a male or female. It's Lucy's called Lucy because during the discovery, when they were unearthing the bones, they had on radio Lucy in the Sky playing. And therefore they assumed that Lucy, well, I guess that's one assumption at first that she was a female. Now there's strong doubts whether or not she was a female. But you can see that many of these pictures show a very strong muscular man and a very ape face. And that's because even though Lucy is one of the best documented cases of evolution and the bones, the findings are among the most complete, nonetheless, they're only about 20% complete, as I'll show. So pretty hard going from the bones to the drawings. But anyways, this is a common picture. And again, you see this in a lot of the drawings, very modern, muscular human male body and very ape-like head. And that is a comparison, though, of an ape head. You can see here on the left side. On the right side, you can see a human baby. Obviously, enormous differences. And this article I'm using from the National Geographic because they said DNA profiles of these two are nearly 99% the same. Well, that's not true. They're about 85% the same, which means you're talking about a 500 million base pair differences. So the differences are enormous. Differences between the DNA of a chimp in this case and a human in this case. Okay, there we can see disagreement by creationists. You have a number of fossil finds. Many of these, the only thing they've found is the skull or parts of the skull. ER 1813, we can see that the creationists sign in all cases except one, an ape, and there's only one exception. So you can see even among creationists, there is disagreement. And the reason there is disagreement is because, again, all we have is some damaged fragments. And therefore, you objectively look at them and it's very hard to tell, indeed, are they humans or are they apes? And so that's what we find. These are among the many books about Lucy. The Beginnings of Humankind. There are at least a dozen books written by the authorities which talk about Lucy. And it's called The Beginnings of Humankind. A fascinating story. Lucy herself is stunning. And we can see there are many other books. These are two of the more popular books which make a case for Lucy as being our evolutionary ancestor. And here's the skeleton of Lucy. The white is filled in. The brownish color is actually what they found, and you can see they found bone fragments. And when what they argue is 40% of a skeleton has been found, and this is 40% of parts have been found. In total, of the total skeleton, they found 20%. And again, this is the most complete Australopithecines ever found. And you can see that there's not much there. And there's debate about whether or not all these bones belong to Lucy. They found them in a fairly widespread area. And a problem is I think a lot of these were apes that died or humans that died. And the bones were scattered because of scavenging of animals. And they spread the body parts and chewed on the meat, and then the bony parts were left. And so they're typically in a wide area because of how they disappeared. Problems, there are fragments, there's several hundred, and they're found scattered over about 1.5 square miles. One could debate that because it's, you can find two sets of bones and they look like they belong to the same creature, but since they're only fragments, that's very hard to determine. And a careful examination found at least one bone belongs to the baboon. And the rest, there's wide agreement. The rest are part of the same creature, but not full agreement. Of the 47 of 207 bones that we humans have about 207 bones. They found 207 bone fragments. And most are actually small fragments, so they have to glue them together. And they reconstruct the skeleton according to pre-existing beliefs. So they're assembled according to what they believe Lucy was. And if it was ape, they assembled it accordingly, and they believed it was an ape-man combination, so they were assembled accordingly. And a lot of the traits were ape traits because, indeed, my conclusion is they were just an ape, not an ape evolving to become a human. The mandible, in this case, resembles that of a gorilla. So that's a good case of, could well be from a gorilla. And you can see Lucy versus modern man. You can see Lucy's obviously pretty old. And you can see how V-shaped the jaw is. Modern man is more U-shaped. And you can see other differences, but still there are fairly amount of differences. And now you can see the bones are put on a drawing of an ape. And then you can see the bones are put on the drawing of a human, a male, a man. And you can see they fit the ape stronger more than they do to fit the man. And again, part of this is because they have bone fragments. Lucy is the most famous of all fossils ever discovered. And technically, the name is Australopithecus afarensis. And the bones were found in Ethiopia. And secular museums worldwide have created hundreds of life-size mannequins of this female. And so it's widely portrayed as the best example of a missing link. So attacking this, of course, attacks really the whole core of the evolutionary belief. Footprints, they found some footprints in 1976. And the footprints were in Laetoli, which is in Tanzania. And they hypothesized, they don't know, of course, but they hypothesized they belong to Lucy. But if they did, there is a problem because there's dating problems. And also a major problem is that these are very human-like feet, prints. And therefore, I guess that's one way of trying to show, well, Lucy had human feet. But they found no evidence of bones, of foot bones, sorry. And therefore, they can only assume, and I'll show you that in a minute. And they're dated by some evolutionists as close to 500,000 years older than Lucy. So again, there's some disagreement here. But they say, well, it might not have been Lucy, but it was a Australopithecus afarensis. And therefore, it is a valid means of evaluating Lucy herself. And you can see the difference between ape feet and human feet. The main difference is that apes don't have 2 feet and 2 hands. They have 4 hands. And that's very useful because they use the 4 hands to climb up trees. Humans have a hard time crawling up trees because our feet don't work so well for tree climbing, whereas the apes have 4 hands, so they're far more effective at climbing up trees. And that difference can be clear in the tracks, and I'll show you the tracks in a few minutes. But our feet are adapted for walking on all two feet. And Lucy's 4 hands are designed not to walk on 2 feet bipedally, but they're designed to climb trees and walk on their hands on the ground. And there you can see a footprint. This does not at all look like a footprint of an ape. It looks very much like a footprint of a human. Distorted somewhat. This was in volcanic ash and then covered, so therefore we have some evidence of what they look like originally. Ironically, though, there's not many of the footprints that look good enough, even like this one. This is one of the best that they've found. But again, we can see looks like it's curved. Probably they were walking more on their side and instead of walking flat on the tree. And there you can see the footprints. And these are claimed to be, or at least they try to attribute these to Lucy's kind. And there you can see a picture. Artistic license has shown that they've got mom and dad and a baby walking in the mud here. I find it interesting that you can see animals behind Lucy, and the animals are modern giraffe and modern other animals. So what they found in the area they found Lucy, they found other animals, none of which look like they're primitive giraffe or primitive birds or primitive mammals. And so this supports my conclusion that Lucy was nothing more than a chimpanzee, and has not evolved like the other animals they show around here. The giraffe and so on have not evolved either. Those 69 prints they found, and 2 adults and a child. And they're about 1,000 miles from the Lucy bones, which is further evidence that they were not maybe even Lucy's kind. And likely human footprints, and they do not differ from human footprints today you find. In fact, Tim White, who's a leading paleoanthropologist, he said the Laetoli hominid trails do not differ substantially from modern human trails on a similar substrate. And they've done this. They've had people take their shoes off and walk on volcanic ash, and they found the footprints are essentially, as far as we can tell, humans. And then additional footprints were found in 2016, about 150 meters away. And they found a new track, again, surrounded by hundreds of footprints belonging to modern mammals and birds. And so this is another case where from the surrounding evidence, they are the evidence of a chimpanzee and not of humans. And the local people, they claim these are children's prints. And they claim that modern people there, they do walk occasionally on adult prints as well. So the Maasai tribe there, they claim that these are just local prints. They were not any primitive ancestor. They were just prints that were their relatives, their ancestors walked on a couple hundred years ago, and they were preserved in the volcanic ash. You can't date, of course, the prints. All you can date is the ash. And even the dates of the ash are not all that accurate, but assuming they are, we can't date when the prints were made. We can only date when the ash occurred. Now you can see here is Lucy from what evidence we have compared to a modern man. And Lucy was about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. And a modern human is 5 feet 10, average 5 feet 9 when you look at males and females. And there you can see the skull of Lucy. And the white is, of course, filled in, plaster of Paris. The brown is Lucy itself. So you can see, really, there's not enough evidence to determine much about Lucy from the skull, except you can see by the ear would be, you can see a bone that looks like it came from an ape. And some paleoanthropologists say it was nothing more than an ape. But they try to produce this in such a way to where it looks human. And then artist interpretation, they gave a set of bones similar to Lucy's, and they had artists draw pictures from those bones. And you can see the huge difference between the drawings which were produced, again, showing artistic license. And 90% or 80% is a result of what's in the artist's mind and not based on the facts. And this is well recognized, and that's why there's so many differences. I have a friend of mine who's got a whole bunch of pictures showing more differences than I show here. And there you can see, and this is in the Creation Museum in Kentucky, and they constructed from the bones what the creature looked like, and you can see the creature looks like an ape, a chimp. And this is the most famous missing link. And from, we have chimps and modern humans. You can see we should have had a whole series of links, and we can see we don't have any except Lucy. So Lucy's the only one we can stick in between there. Or at least attempt to stick in between there. And there you can see a chimp skull compared to a human skull. You can see enormous differences. And Lucy is not very successful in bridging these, but it's the best they have, so they doubt this is very important. And then we can see that there's evidence that Australopithecus afarensis is nothing more than an ape. Homo sapiens, you can see quite a difference between Homo sapiens and Australopithecus, which are far closer to primates. And these drawings, by the way, were made by evolutionists. And then walking upright is critical to prove human evolution. Humans are the only primates that walk fully all the time, almost all the time, committed to walking upright as adults. And the design of the body is very different because of being able to walk upright. Now, chimps can walk for a certain length upright, but it's not comfortable to do so, and their body is not designed to do so for long periods of time as humans do. Humans, it's pretty hard to crawl around on your four limbs. And there you can see a drawing of some of the differences. And one major difference in the skull is where the bone enters in the occipital area here in the back of the skull. And there's a foramen magnum that the vertebrae go into. And we can see with humans, it's towards the bottom. With chimps, and I think just about all apes, it's on the back. And we can see here pictures of, in this case, a gorilla. And you can see the human, gorilla, and chimp and humans. Human would be E. And you can see there's no evidence of the foramen magnum in the human, but there's evidence in all cases of the entry of the foramen magnum in all the apes, orangutan, a male gorilla, and a female gorilla, and a chimp, I guess, they used. And when we look at from the bottom view up, we can see how different position the foramen magnum is on humans. And so this is one thing they look for. Now, with most of these skeletons they've found, especially the skull part, they don't have enough evidence to say where the foramen magnum went into. And there the brain size is different. Human brain about 1378 grams. That's average. Chimp brain about 399 grams. So you can see size-wise, there's an enormous difference between the two. When we chart this up, you can see humans. The top line, the blue line, the top one is humans. Gorilla is the next largest, and then orangutan, and then chimp. So chimp would be fairly, well, 3 positions below humans. And the chimp, therefore, is considerably smaller than humans. And then we can see, well, going the list down, we can see that we're looking at fairly small brains compared to humans. Many other differences. The eyes are very different. You can see a human eyes at the top, and humans, you can see the whites of the eyes, whereas other primates don't have whites of the eyes. And this is important for humans because I can tell what she is looking at. With apes, you can't tell what they're looking at because the eye is mostly dark except the iris diaphragm. And the pupil, of course, is black. With humans, pupil is black, iris diaphragm is brown, and you can see the whites of the eyes. So that's one difference. So we're talking about hundreds of differences, and I only have time to bring up a few. And there we compare the drawings of the chimp or the chimp human intermediary and a human. And I've noticed in a lot of these drawings, when they draw pictures of our supposed ancestors, they draw the whites of the eyes. So these are small ways that they try to make chimps look more human. And this is probably the best example. And people don't notice this, I guess, unless you bring it out. But you can see that they're looking at a very different face because of the whites of the eyes. So it makes it look more human. It's on the way to evolving to a human. And again, here's a couple more pictures where, again, they show this. And the one where they just show the face, you can see they have a number of human traits trying to show in between the human and the chimp. And the chimps have long hips with flat iliac blades designed for walking on all fours. And you can see that here. So when you compare the hips with humans, a huge difference between the hips of the chimps and hips of humans. The shorter curved iliac blades, and the reason that design exists so the gluteus medius can attach so that the human can walk upright. And so the apes don't have that advantage, so therefore it's not comfortable at all for them to walk upright. And you can see the difference in walking by looking at the skeleton. And the skeleton differences are pretty clear. And one you can see here is the arms for the ape are much longer, so they can walk on all fours. Whereas humans, the arms are not nearly as long. When you look at the finger bones from Lucy's species, curved, human finger bone is straight. And therefore the bones are very different as a result of the different design, because chimps knuckle walk where humans don't at all. And when we compare these, we can see Homo sapiens is the fourth metatarsal. You can see the Homo sapiens design is very different from that of the chimps and other types of animals, other types of primates. And here you can see a feet pattern. Human feet are totally unique. There's no primate that's even close. And I have drawings on one side here. You can see in detail how different they are. And then the other side, I have just about all of the well-known larger apes. And you can see, again, humans are different from every single one of them. At the top, you can see the man image right here. And ironically, this is serious. One person has studied this, and he claims the bones are evidence of falling from a tree 3.1 million years ago. And this is a well-known paleontologist who looked at the damage of the bones, and that's the type of fall that would have produced that damage. Well, here Lucy was supposed to be arboreal, walked in trees, lived in trees, and yet obviously didn't do it very well if he fell out of a tree. And that's the end of my presentation. I could go on, but you find you put people to sleep after so long. Any comments?
Right. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
Okay. I'll get rid of this here.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Let's start by talking about let's talk about a few general considerations. You mentioned in your presentation that some of these fossils are mixed with other fossils, and would you say that because I know that that Marvin Lubenow in his book Bones of Contention, and I think I've heard you say it as well, that human fossils human bones actually do get mixed in with these. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, they do, and they do because, of course, humans did live in Africa, where other primates lived, and therefore they're going to get mixed up. It's common for human bones to be found with ape and primate bones because many humans still live in Africa, of course, today. Many humans lived in Africa for centuries. And so therefore, now it depends on the tribe and their burial practices, but not all tribes dug a hole 6 feet down and buried somebody. Not all buried them in caskets. And so therefore, sometimes they were buried, well, sometimes not buried at all, but sometimes buried only a foot or two down, and animals tend to dig the corpses up and consume the meat. So therefore, that was common. And that's how they scatter the bones. And of course, the bones, when they're scattered, they get mixed up, and it's not always easy to determine whether or not these bones belong to one specific chimp, or whether or not they're different kinds of primates mixed together, including possibly human bones. So yeah, that's a problem.
Right. And we're going to go over the Lucy fossil here in a second, because I have some specific questions, because sometimes people will claim certain evidence for that they think that Lucy was bipedal and so forth. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. Okay. Here's the Lucy fossil. Is that right?
Right. That's it. Yep. Very famous.
Right. Right. All right. First thing I want to ask is about the jaw. Some people say that the teeth is indicative of human teeth or something like that. Do you want to comment on that, or is
Well, they are similar. I mean, primate teeth are very similar, and so some are similar. The canine is one of the teeth that's different, very major difference. And I'm not sure how many chimps or how many other primates have canine teeth, but this is one way they can tell the difference. But and again, it could be, although I think that's part of a chimp. But on the other hand, I have to wonder whether those teeth actually go with. Usually, they don't find the teeth with the jaw. Usually, they're separated. So I need to, I guess, read more about Lucy and see whether or not the teeth were actually found in the sockets, or whether or not they were placed in the sockets and they were found nearby.
right?
The problem you have when people have their, and this is true among evolutionists, they recognize this. I have my own theory about evolution, you have your own theory, and therefore I tend to interpret the evidence according to my theory, and you interpret the evidence according to your theory, and therefore I don't want to show my evidence because I want my theory to prevail. And so you sometimes have to get upset and have to go to court and have to complain and so on, so you can see my evidence. Now, I may give you some casts of my evidence, but on the other hand, I'm leery for a number of reasons. I'm leery of giving you my evidence because you might find information which contradicts my theory. And there's a huge amount of competition among paleoanthropologists as to each theory. And they're pretty open about this, and they're getting into strong fights.
You know, interesting. Well, interesting. They found when Creation Museum, when they started doing an artistic rendition, you showed an image of this actually in your presentation of the chimp, and he's standing on a bunch of photos that in the Creation Museum, and those photos represent about 100 different models that evolutionists have of what Lucy looked like. Isn't that right? They have a bunch of different ideas. And so they didn't even know how to do that. So they presented the more biblically accurate view of Lucy, and then had Lucy standing on all these photos of different models that evolutionists have on what Lucy looked like. So they don't even agree exactly on what Lucy even looked like.
No, they don't. And if I recall, David Minton did that reconstruction, and he is a professor of anatomy at a university for 30 years, I think, at a medical school, actually.
He passed away. That was sad. I would have loved to have interviewed him. Another one thing that they bring up is I've heard a lot of evolutionists try to claim that Lucy's foramen magma is internal. Now that's essentially the and you mentioned the foramen magma in your presentation. That's the part that goes up right like this, and chimps is like right there in the back of his head. You showed several different photos of that. And the reality is that foramen magma is not present in Lucy, and most of the skull is missing. So where are they getting this idea that Lucy had a internal foramen magma like humans have?
Well, they assume he's an she's a whatever she is Australopithecines, and therefore must have had a foramen magnum as humans have. And this is the best. We often, and we all do this. We tend to see what we want to see, and our conceived ideas tends to be very important in how we interpret the evidence. And so you can see when they put Lucy together from these bones they had to do a lot of artistic license. There's a professor I knew at Wayne State University, and we talked about this. And he's an evolutionist, and he said, well, we don't have all the details, but we got a picture about what's going on, and we have to paint the rest of the details. The end result is we have to help the public accept evolution. And yeah, there may be some white lies in there, but on the other hand, the end goal is good because we're helping them understand our ape ancestor, and that's good. And he admitted, yeah, there's a lot of artistic license, but that's art. They have a
as long as you support evolution, that's good to go. Okay, to lie about it. All right. Another thing.
The main thing they look at is the hip bones.
Yeah.
Which even these pictures you show here, it shows a very long hip bones, more like a chimp and not like a human.
Oh, I agree. I have heard evolutionists claim that the hip bone of Lucy is bowl shaped like humans, but you look at here, this is what they have of the hip right here. And if you actually compare that side up side with a chimp's hip, it looks much more closer to that than that of human. And there's not really a lot there. So where are they getting this idea that it's bowl shaped?
Well, they see what they want to see.
Right.
I mean, if I was fully committed to the evolutionary worldview, I would say, well, look, yeah, we don't have all the evidence, but we have a lot of bones, and there's good evidence that this was evolving from a chimp to a human, and it's still got some chimp traits. But on the other hand, it has some human traits. Got to explain this. So therefore, the fossil evidence is out there. We just have to find it. And we don't have the best, but hey, we're getting there. We'll give us another 150 years, and we'll dig up a lot more fossils, and we'll find a lot more evidence. But
they already had 150 years, and still they wind up with problems. All right here, this sanctum looks like a human sanctum. Would you say that this is a fossil that has mixed in with the Lucifine?
It could be. It does look somewhat human, and I don't recall offhand what a chimp sacrum looks like.
I've actually looked at the chimp sanctum. It's longer. It's like more longer. I see. I don't know whether this is deformed or if this is an actual human sanctum. It looks like a human sanctum. It's got the same amount of holes, and the shape is like a Superman symbol like that. And the chimp's sanctum is like longer.
Yeah, it could be human. Yeah.
I heard something about the risk. Some evolutionists have said that there is evidence of the morphology being quadrupedal because there's something about the wrists of the skeleton. Do you know anything about that in terms of the hands? I know the hands. I don't think the hands was found in it. Is there?
No, there's no hands, no evidence of hands or feet. I find it interesting that, as far as I'm aware, all of these cases where they dig up a supposed missing link, they tend to be missing the most important parts, like the hands and the feet. Again, here they're missing the most important parts. So you have to wonder if I was dependent upon grants to make a living, and I had to get my next grant from the National Geographic, I had to present some evidence of what we're looking for, which is evidence of human evolution. I might be inclined to say, hey, yeah, we found some hand bones here, and let's just ignore those. And it's already well known in getting grants. I mean, I don't know if you know much about professors, but a lot, they make a living basically getting grants. If they don't get a grant, the university says goodbye. They're gone. They have to find something else. And so many professors don't have tenure at the university. They have a job at the university as long as they get grants. And therefore, getting grants is very, very important to survive. And, I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids, I got a mortgage, and hey, I'm not lying in it. Just, these hand bones, they look too human. And so therefore, I can't make my case, and therefore I'm not going to be able to get the money from National Geographic to pay my bills. So therefore, hey, I got to support my wife and kids. So therefore, I will just ignore these hand bones. And the rest I can make a good case for. And so National Geographic is impressed, and they'll give me another couple of years grant money so I can continue my research. And then maybe I'll find evidence of bones that will look more like chimps.
Right. Also, the feet of Lucy. You mentioned that the feet is not present with Lucy at all.
Right.
Some people have tried to argue that Lucy's feet were curved, arched like humans. Now, I've heard two different ways that they approach this. One, they bring up the Laetoli. They always bring up the Laetoli footprints, always, because they think Lucy made those prints. But there's no doubt that if you look at the Laetoli footprints, it's a human that made those prints. Yeah, if someone was walking barefooted on a beach, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
The second one I've heard is some people will try to raise up other Australopithecines that they claim that they had feet. Now, from what I understand, most of them, the feet is actually missing, but there are some that seems to have the foot like the Dikika Child, which is supposed to be the same species as Lucy. Do you know anything about the Dikika Child? I heard that the foot was actually found some distance away from the fossil, embedded in a rock, maybe. I think
Yeah, my concern about that situation is that it could well be a human foot. And it could, again, there's human and chimp, etc., bones mixed up in many of these finds. So it could have been a human foot they found, and it fits their idea. So,
right. And there is another fossil that is actually more complete than Lucy. It's called, I believe the discoverer of it. It's known as Littlefoot, is what they call it. But it's the discoverer, I think, referred to it as a different species. He called it Australopithecus Prometheus, I think. And then, but there are people that still classify that as Africanus. So it's kind of a little bit disputed on that. But according to the person who discovered it, he said there was way too many differences between that and Africanus. So he gave it a new name, Prometheus. But any given case, it's very complete. Now if you look at it, well, let me bring that up real quick. I got an image of it. All right. So here, this is the image of the Littlefoot. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Basically, it pretty much just looks like an ape. The thing that gets a lot of people that they usually bring up is this foot right here.
Yeah, right.
And it's such a small foot, which hence the name, but and it looks out of proportion for the rest of them, because I mean, how could he support his weight on that? But some people say that it has an inline big toe, and therefore they consider that transitional. So do you have any comments on this particular find?
Yeah, the discussions about that are such where when I talk about Lucy being the most complete, and yeah, technically she's not. I think I said almost one of the most complete. But on the other hand, some people don't include this in that category because there's debates about what this was. Was a gorilla or some? Do they claim this is an Australopithecus? I'm not sure. I don't think they do. But at any rate, if you include this, then Lucy is one of the most complete. And this is certainly much more complete. But on the other hand, you can see by looking at this, it looks to me like there's different animals mixed together in that. Judging by the rib bones, for example, there just seems that several don't fit. And therefore, and again, you can see, well, the skull's pretty complete. Usually that's the primary thing they find is the skulls. And that's because, of course, skull bones are thicker, they're stronger, and they're resistant to decay, and animals don't tend to break them up as much as they do other bones. They try to get the bone marrow from the leg bones and so on. But the head bones, they're probably harder to break open, and therefore you end up with more complete skulls. On the other hand, they can be broken open, and that may be why you find a number of cases where the skull fragments only are found, because they break them open to eat the the meat.
Does the pelvis look like it's indicative of a gorilla or an ape of some sort?
Well, boy, that's hard to tell there, especially the one side where there's not much left of the pelvis. And I have to wonder when they uncovered this, how much puckering was on the bones, and whether they're able to separate effectively the bone itself from the crust that tends to be around these bones, the hard crust they've got to clean off with toothpicks and dental tools and brushes. And so I have to wonder how good of a job they did. And again, these look like they were gnawed by animals, which is often the case. But there's a number of bones they have here which look out of place. I've come across this a number of times. I should have looked in more detail in what they found, but
that's fine. The foot looks a bit deformed. I mean, that does not look like it could support this weight at all. So do you think that the foot is deformed, maybe detached from a different creature and put together, or what?
it sure is not complete enough really to make any judgments about the foot bone. It looks like some of them don't belong. And then look like the metatarsals look okay, but the phalanges don't look, or if they're even there. I'd be interested in what the finder had to say about this, whether he looked into detail into these different parts. But I know they found some hand finger bones and feet phalanges that they conclude are from Australopithecus types.
I have another question on the Australopithecus apparensis Lucy. All right. On Lucy, they found a leg, I guess the femur or something like that, where the kneecap is like bent a certain way. And they say that's evidence that this animal either was walking upright or tried to, be able to walk upright. Do you know anything about the I know that the leg bone or the kneecap, it was one of the first things that was brought up, because my understanding was that it was found some distance away from Lucy. And so there's a question mark about whether or not, if that's actually part of the original specimen or not. So do you have any comments on the what I'm talking about, with the knees posted?
Yeah, oh yeah. I would say the big problem is it's in such poor condition, and they only found one. Sometimes if you find two kneecaps, you can then, from the two, you can pretty accurately construct what one would look like. But all they have is fragments of one, and that makes it difficult to tell the nuances. And also, there are similar kneecap bones between chimps and humans are similar. I mean, they're not that, they basically protect the knee system. And so that's not, but yeah, that's what
But that wouldn't be proof
they
of.
can look at it as the hand and the teeth bones, though, which
That
again,
wouldn't
they
be,
can't look at Lucy, they have to look at other animals.
but that wouldn't be proof of bipedal, like that they often parade about the kneecap.
Right.
Did they find it some distance away from Lucy originally? Because I
From
heard
my
comment.
recollection, yes, they did find it. The bones as a whole were scattered quite a large area, which is pretty common again because carnivorous animals, they pull the bones out and carry them to their den and carry them from various places, and so they get scattered around. So that's pretty common.
Yeah. And Dikika Child, I think let me share my screen again. It's that image that I mentioned. Let's see. Right here. I think this is Dikika Child. My understanding is that the arms are actually all the way to the kneecap. So the long arm seems to be indicative of a primate. And it's also got curved phalanges or curved fingers. I know that you said earlier that that's that's indicative of a tree climber. Is that correct?
Right, right.
So this right here, it looks like a typical primate.
And two, the number of primates are extinct. And so therefore, a lot of these they find look human-like, but they're simply primates which happen to look human-like, which are not evolving to humans, but they happen to have traits that are similar to humans, like gorillas. In many ways, gorillas look more human-like than chimps do. And in fact, it was one time believed that we evolved from gorillas or gorilla-like creature and not from chimps. But there are big differences. There's many similarities, but there are big differences. And so therefore, they switched from.
Actually, that I don't think that one might be I can't remember if that's Dikika Child or Australopithecus Sediba or Sediba.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be that. I don't remember which image that was for. All right. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the next one, Neanderthals. Neanderthals had certain distinguished physical qualities, particularly with the head area, and that a lot of people seem to pounce on. Now, of course, young Earth creationists, we understand there are variations, and there are variations of humans and so forth that happen that way. But my understanding is that evolutionists do acknowledge that Neanderthals are fully human. In fact, they even argue that they're related to modern humans. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
All right.
And that's one I know a lot about because Neanderthals have been touted for 150 years as evidence of human evolution. And so we have a lot of bones, a lot of not just bone fragments, but we have a lot of fairly complete skeletons. In fact, we're able to, from the fragments we have, we're able to get a 100% complete skeleton by taking parts from different skeletons they found and putting them together. In fact, you have charts, which I have, which show indeed that different skeleton parts have different colors, and the color codes tell you where they came from. And so now we're not talking about fragments, we're talking about really a complete, well-assembled skeleton. So we have a lot of information, indeed, what they look like. And that's pretty well. National Geographic about a decade ago basically said, these are Neanderthals, they are us, period. And they had a whole article which they did a good job showing indeed that indeed these are simply another group of people. They're a people group. They're not any primitive ancestors. In fact, as time goes on, we discover they had musical instruments. They had medical instruments they used. They had paintings which they drew inside of caves and other places. So we are more and more finding that indeed they are human, had human traits, and they buried their dead, and they had flowers they buried with their dead, indicating that indeed they were fully human and intermarried. We now have genes. I have actually quite a few people from Europe, as my relatives came from Europe. I have, I think, 12 or 14% Neanderthal genes. And that I'm finding is not unusual. I have friends that say, oh, yeah, I'm 15% Neanderthal. And other friends that say, well, I'm only 7% Neanderthal. So the conclusion is, in spite of the problems of doing this work, the conclusion is that indeed Neanderthal is just another group of people. They're just a people group.
Right. And they were found in Europe. So people that are from Europe would be closer in terms of their genes as far as inheriting their genes from Neanderthal ancestors and so forth.
Right. That's true.
What are the physical distinctions that people tend to pounce on? There's certain facial distinctions or things with the eyebrow. What exactly it is it that sets them apart that people tend to bring up and that sort of thing that's different from the way a lot of people are?
The facial differences are primarily by the brow ridge above the eyes, and but that is not rare among people today. There are people today who have very similar facial differences than from the rest of the people, rest of the population. And in church once, there's a fellow sat behind me, and boy, he was a perfect Neanderthal, perfect Neanderthal. And I want to get a picture of him, but my wife says, you better not ask him. And not very nice. When I taught at Bowling Green, we had a professor who was very, very, he was 100% Neanderthal. I mean, you look at him and he's right from the books. And I remember when I was teaching at Northwest State, I mentioned that, and a student in the class said, yeah, her father taught at Bowling Green, and she knew who I was talking about. She says, yes, he has a very perfect Neanderthal face, etc. And there are people who have those traits.
You know, the funny thing is people tend to use the word Neanderthal to be an insult on people's intelligence, but their brains were bigger than ours, wasn't it?
Yeah, slightly bigger on the average than ours, yeah.
So ironically, they're probably just as smart as any modern human.
From what we know now, they were. In fact, it seems like every third month comes out a new article showing that they were just like us. And you get this expression over and over again. New discovery shows Neanderthals were just like us. They made music, they had musical instruments, which they feel now from evaluation of these instruments, they are quite sophisticated and can produce sounds very similar to musical instruments that we use today. And so therefore, the differences are slowly being erased, and now they are regarded by pretty much all paleoanthropologists as simply another people group, another race of humans. Creationists don't like, of course, to use the word race because there's only one race, the human race. We prefer the term people groups, which is more accurate actually from an anthropological viewpoint, and therefore they are.
Do any of them ever say that they are try to argue for a different species of human? Do some of them try to argue that?
In the past, but today I'm not aware of anybody who does. So that's history.
That's
and
outdated.
So, in fact, I think if you would argue they're different species, you might probably racist. So they're not. They're just like us. In fact,
Awesome.
they're hard pressed to find differences between us and them, aside from these minor anatomical differences.
Could you discuss Java Man real quick? What exactly was Java Man? Are they related to humans? What is the issues involved on that?
Java Man was, they think that several of the bones were, I did an article on that, I should recall the differences, but several of the bones were human legs. The skull bone was an ape. And so therefore it was an interesting story behind this because, of course, the guy who discovered these, a doctor, he turned on to evolution in college, and he went to Africa in Java looking for evidence of human evolution. And in looking for it, he found these bones, and he was really excited about them, but they were not very well received. And he became kind of bitter. Evidently, he hid them below the floorboards in his house at one time. And there's different stories about what he thought they were. At one time, I guess he thought they were a gorilla or a other type of ape. And kind of a tragic story in a way because he really wasn't given the respect he felt he deserved. And of course, he didn't find the bones. His workers found the bones. And his workers found the bone in an area which was very wet, very damp by a riverbed. And bones don't last too long when they're in wet, damp areas. They last the longest in dry deserts in Africa, like Laetoli. And that's one reason we have so many finds from that area, because very dry areas, and therefore bones are preserved for a much longer period of time. But Java Man, that wasn't the case.
One time they found a tooth of an extinct pig, but they thought it was I think that's the one that they called Nebraska Man, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
They built up an entire ape man from this tooth. Do you know some stuff about that?
Hesperopithecus, yeah, that's a very famous example because they had pictures of him and his family, his wife and his kids, in Africa. Some nice pictures which are touted throughout the world. This is a major mistake, but the mistake is not as foolish as one might think because pigs' teeth are similar to human teeth. And as you find other parts are similar, like the valves from the heart. In fact, when they do transplants, I understand that they use basically transplants from pig valves. And so therefore there are not differences that we expect. And evolutionary, of course, pigs would be far away from us, but on the other hand, in many ways, they have a lot of traits similar to us, which would make sense from a creationist standpoint.
Right.
And I was out it for 20 years or so. And the articles in New Scientist and other leading magazines basically tout that this is an important discovery and we finally found a tooth, but we've got
teeth tend to last a while, so teeth don't break down as easy as other bones might.
Yeah, teeth are the hardest substance in the body, of course, and in fact, most fossils are known from the teeth. And we have more evidence from the teeth than any other, because again, they last far longer than anything else.
Did they use that tooth in the Scope trial? I think I read that somewhere. Did they use that as proof?
They referred to it. Now, the Scope trial, the judge basically didn't allow any testimony on evolution because that wasn't the purpose of the trial. But he did allow them to do papers, to write papers of their finds, and that was included in the transcript. And it's kind of good that they, from the judge's standpoint, that he didn't allow the testimony because probably that would have been criticized in the trial. But since they only had papers they submitted, documents they submitted, and they spent a lot of time working on them to make sure they were accurate, or at least more as accurate as they could get them back then. And so it gave the evolutionists an advantage. On the stand, it would be harder to defend yourself and from memory describe all of what you found. And in this case, they didn't have to. They just relied upon a group of scientists and they pooled their knowledge and they referred to the literature. So they were able to do a lot better job making their case when they wrote out the papers which defended it. On the other hand, of course, now we do have evidence, fortunately, of what their case was. And now we know their evidence, of course. It's embarrassing. Not only Hesperopithecus, but also the other finds.
What is the Cro-Magnon Man? What is that exactly?
That's another, Cro-Magnon is another, I think another people group, as a number of these others were.
So they're similar to Neanderthals, but essentially they're just related to us.
Right.
All right. All right, let's talk about some evolutionary hopes. One particular one is the one of the most famous one, Piltdown Man, where they kind of glue half of a gorilla's jaw or something like that to a human skull, or not jaw. I think it was maybe a human's jaw, maybe, and that you filed the teeth down or something like that.
Yeah, human skull.
I believe I heard you say that it was an obvious forgery once.
Yeah, it was. And the most ironic thing about that was it was exposed, 30 years later. And when it was exposed, it was found that it wasn't just a forgery, it was a badly done forgery. But you notice, for example, file marks on the teeth. And you could see this just from the naked eye. You just look at the teeth and you see the file marks that were filed the teeth down. And so it's amazing. It fooled scientists for so long. And of course, the reason it did so is because they wanted to believe in evolution, and therefore this was seen as evidence. In fact, this was the main evidence for many years. And as a matter of fact that it was so widely accepted by leading paleoanthropologists indicates people see what they want to see. They see what they believe.
Currently, today, Piltdown Man is rejected by evolutionists as a ancestor of humans. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, since the late 50s, it was rejected. There's a number of films that did an excellent job on that, which showed indeed why it was accepted for so long and how it really set off evolutionists on the wrong path, because they accepted it partially because it conformed to a certain evolutionary idea. And of course, that misled evolutionists because they were trying to support that idea when indeed they couldn't, because of course it was forgery. And embarrassing, a lot of people felt, why in the world didn't someone look at it? It was the 50s, I think, middle 50s. It was exposed. Why didn't someone look at it more carefully? Well,
because they really wanted to believe.
Wanted to believe that this was the evidence. In fact, it was the main evidence for evolution for 20 some years.
Okay, and here's another one.
Lots of textbooks, and they feature in high school textbooks, they feature Piltdown Man as evidence of evolution. Piltdown Man, Neanderthal Man, and several others they feature. Now, today we look at those and we realize how foolish they are. But on the other hand, these drawings and skulls they use convince millions of people to accept evolution, even though now we recognize they're not true. And there's no debate among them.
Right.
And here's the most was valid, you'd be laughed out of it.
Right. The most famous evolutionary forgery of all, Haeckel's Embryos. Interesting enough, he faked those drawings, and I believe I heard you say he was actual, or not in this presentation, but I've heard you say before that he was an excellent artist. So it wasn't because he lacked drawing skill or anything like that. He clearly faked them. And we actually we know the live photos. We've got the live photos. I've seen you present them as well on other presentations before. These drawings were faked at that time to support. I think he had a view he called it the biogenic law, where he thought that folds were gill slits, and so he was trying to support the idea that we evolved from fish and that sort of thing. And some abortion clinics still used for a long time these Haeckel's drawings in order to support abortion even. And in biology textbooks had them on for the longest time. Do they still have Haeckel's embryos in modern biology textbooks?
Well, what they say is that Haeckel was wrong, the drawings were forgeries, but his idea was right. And his conclusion was right. And so they come up with some revised versions of the drawings. And because it was, from their standpoint, it was good evidence. And they don't want to lose that. So they just modify it so it's more acceptable to critics.
So they figured out a way to keep it in the textbooks, even though it's bogus. And my understanding, what exactly are those folds right there at the neck that Haeckel was trying to claim that was gill slits?
They're called pharyngeal folds, and they're basically folds which develop into not gills, but develop into structures in that part of the face. But the skin is longer than, so it has to be folded. Of course, they're near the neck area, so the folds have to occur so they can move the neck. And so that's why the folds are there. Called pharyngeal folds, what they're called, but they're not. The theory was they were developing into gills, like they did in humans, but they started in that direction, and then later on they were modified so that they became structures in that part of the body.
One of the things that I noticed about that is that he just kind of skipped right from theory to law and called it biogenic law. He just kind of went around the scientific method, I guess.
There's a whole thick book, really well done, which talked about Haeckel's embryos and why he did what he did and when he did and so on. The fellow who did it was a German scientist who had access to all the original stuff in Haeckel's laboratory. And so he did thick, big 8.5 by 11, 500 and some page book full of illustrations. Does a very good job showing his motivation, why he did what he did. And the main reason he wanted to prove evolution because he thought that was critical to produce a better society. Haeckel is most widely known for his influence on Adolf Hitler. Of course, Hitler didn't, as far as we know, he didn't read Darwin, didn't think much of Darwin. But Darwin, of course, influenced his cousin, Francis Galton. Galton and Darwin influenced Haeckel, and Haeckel, indirectly at least, influenced Adolf Hitler. So we have a very strong chain from Darwin to his cousin, Galton, to Haeckel, to Hitler. And so if you read, I've just been reading parts of Mein Kampf, and when you read Mein Kampf, is my struggle book, you can see he took a lot of ideas directly from Darwin. One quote here I just was looking up. The purity of the racial blood should be guarded so that the best types of humans may be preserved in the future. And so this is what he said in Mein Kampf. And if you read the whole section, he has a whole section on race in Mein Kampf. You can see where he got his ideas from pretty clearly, not directly from Darwin, but from the flow from the channel through Haeckel. And Haeckel, of course, was enormously influential in Nazi Germany. according to him, all of the professors at his university where he was teaching at that time were Darwinists. And Haeckel was critically influential in converting the German intelligentsia to the evolutionary worldview.
Does abortion clinics still use his drawings as support for abortion?
I would hope not, but you never know. I know that was important in the decision the Supreme Court made, what, 30 years ago? And
Yeah.
so now, of course, they don't have that. So now for courts to rule that abortion is legal, it's more difficult. They have a harder time basically saying that this fetus is human. Is a human, and have a harder time arguing it's something else.
Well, we got at least some little win because now the courts made it legal to be able to pass non-abortion laws in states and so forth.
Yeah.
So that was a win. I mean, they're probably never going to do away with it completely because there are lots of people that want to do that. But they can do it away to the point where it's not as late, I guess, in the development. But anyway. All right. Genetic similarities. You mentioned in your presentation that humans are human and chimps are only 85% similar instead of 99%. Now, I did a recent interview actually with Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins on the 84% number and similarity between chimps and humans and that sort of thing. I'm assuming you're referring to that particular study.
Oh, yeah, he's done a good job on that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So you would say that that humans and chimps that what evolutionists have done is cherry pick the data, where I think I've heard you say that they're also excluding junk DNA, what they call junk DNA, and what they call pseudogenes. Now, in reality, these things have actual important biological functions. So, but essentially, what they're saying is that these are leftover remnants of our evolutionary development, and therefore they're just kind of useless in terms of biological function. But you would say, no, we actually know that these do have important biological functions and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we're finding as we do more and more research is we're finding so many parts of the genome we didn't know what they did. And if we don't know what they did, well, maybe they do nothing. And so we didn't really have any evidence that they did something that was important. So as time goes on, we do more and more research on the genome. We're finding that more and more of these genes do have a biological function. They don't necessarily code for proteins, but on the other hand, they have an important function, and therefore the so-called junk useless DNA is shrinking. My guess is probably it'll shrink until there's almost nothing. That we'll find the vast majority of DNA has a function, although it's certainly possible that some does not have a function. But on the other hand, we're not talking about 80%, as they once believed, had no function. We're talking about at where we're at now, a very small percent. And I expect the small percent will go down.
You said that this difference matches up about half a billion base pair differences.
Right, which is huge, a chasm.
Right. Now, some people will still evolutionists will still try to hold on to that percent. I think 99% might even be outdated even among evolutionists because a lot of evolutionists are holding to a 96% number now. So would you say that they need that number to be that high to try to support the idea of a close relationship between humans and chimps?
Right, that number is important for them because if 99% of our DNA has a function, evolution has a harder time explaining that. But they explain evolution by we've got a lot of junk DNA, and then the DNA through chances, random changes, becomes useful. And so it's there doing nothing, and then because of evolution, it accepts some function, and therefore it is very important evidence for evolution. Awesome. And also they look at it, why would God create us with all this junk? I mean, I'm going to design a car. I'm not going to have 3 1,000 parts in that car that have no function, that just cause a problem. So that's evidence for them. That's evidence that God didn't design our body. And that's evidence that evolved. 99% of the genes of the DNA has a function. That doesn't support their worldview relative to God designed versus God didn't design.
And I think you mentioned this in presentation as well. Anatomically, you could tell there's a lot of differences between us and chimps. And I think Marvin Lubenow said, he said, this is outside my area of expertise, he said, but he said that from a commonsensical perspective, you can tell that there's a lot of difference between us and chimpanzees. They got the longer phalanges, they've got the curved fingers. You mentioned the feet of primates are pretty much like another set of hands. And they're quadrupedic, we're bipedal, and so forth. So there's all kinds of differences in our skeleton, in our makeup, in our physique, and they're designed with longer arms so that they can be able to climb on trees and things like that. And obviously, we are not designed that way.
Yeah, that's true. One of the biggest differences is language. There's no way chimps can ever talk because not only the vocal cords, but the whole design of the mouth area, the teeth area, the tongue area, the throat area, that whole area is designed very differently. And that's why babies can't talk, because they don't have the distance between the vocal cords and the cavity, the oral cavity. And therefore that distance has to develop before they can talk. And that's why babies, there's no way a very young baby can talk until that distance is created, because space is critical in our being able to talk. The vocal cords have to be where they're at. The design has to be the way it is before language is possible. And with babies, of course, it's not, because it's too close together and the system isn't developed yet. So what, 2.5, 3, they begin to talk. And at first it's pretty crude, but of course, once they're 5, 6 years old, most children are pretty good talkers.
Right.
Do you have any kids that you're aware of that?
Yeah, I have a son, 13-year-old. He's past toddler age, way past toddler age. But I remember when he was a toddler, and I remember when we were teaching him how to speak and his first words and stuff. So yeah. All right. This would be the end of our discussion. I would love to have you back at some point, probably some point soon, to talk about vestigial organs or vestigial parts that evolutionists believe are like leftover from our evolutionary development. Of course, we don't have time to get into all that now, but that's going to be a big issue, because they'll claim like the tailbone and things like that. But anyway, we can cover that another day. But I think
you have my book called Juices Organs.
I don't have it, but I did remember seeing it on.
You can get that on Amazon.
Yeah,
and
and
you can use copies too. If you look at adall.com, you can get, they have about 1,000 of my books on adall.com, and so you can get used copies and save a few bucks.
Could you spell?
But Amazon is pretty cheap on Amazon. So,
all right, what was it called? Adall?
It's adall.com. Adall, ADDALL.com. It's a website which basically searches hundreds of book dealers and used book dealers and so on. And you can do a search on there, and you'll get, I don't know, about 500 of my, I don't remember the number, but about 500 of my books are on there. So that's one quick source to go to. Or on Amazon, of course, has them all. And you can get them on Amazon Prime, so you don't have to pay postage.
I couldn't get the ape to ancestor one. I really wanted that one. I got the forensic fossil one, hoping that would have a little bit more anthropology. It has some useful stuff in there, including about some stuff he wrote about birds and dinosaurs, things like that, and from paleontology, I guess. But I was kind of looking for the anthropology stuff. But you said that I can send you my address and you will send me
a I'll send you a copy. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I looked everywhere for that. I couldn't find it. You said they're revising the book or something? Were you revising it?
Yeah, we're revising it. Hopefully it'll be out soon. It's just hard to get this stuff coordinated. People are so busy.
Right. It has been great discussion. I learned a lot. I'm glad that we had. I know it's been a long one, but the fossils and stuff. These things are constantly being brought up by evolutionists as proof. I do have one final question for you. A lot of evolutionists do present these kind of things as transitional fossils. Now, a transitional fossil, by definition, is an intermediate,
Right.
essentially, an in-between state. You cannot if something is truly transitional, you wouldn't be able to, like in the case of ape to man kind of thing, you wouldn't be able to classify it as human or ape. It would have some similarities human, it would have some similarities ape, but it would be neither one. It'd be very
Right.
different, and you see these slight changes in between. And so a lot of these people are pointing to these things and claiming that they are transitional fossils. What would you be your response to someone who thinks that these fossils represent transitional, that they are intermediate states?
The problem is that evolutionists admit the best case, they say, the best case for transitional forms are horses, whales, and humans. Best case. Most animals, they have no clue, no guesses of the transitional forms. And I just finished an article which I sent to the publisher a few days ago on whales, and also I did one on horses, and of course I've done a lot on humans. So the best examples they have, especially whales, is pathetic. It just they're really pathetic in trying to get transitional fossils for whales. Same thing with horses. And this is widely acknowledged. I quoted my article on horses. I quoted Gould half the article. Gould is pointing out that indeed this is an embarrassment for evolutionists to claim that horses are a nice straight line ladder type evolution. They're not. And so all we have is a lot of extinct horses, about a couple of hundred different horse species or horse types in the fossil record. And they don't show a nice transition from one to the other. They show basically we had a lot of variety in horses, like we have variety in dogs and cats and so many other animals. And so evolutionists admit that the fossil record for horses is basically non-existent. At least what they're trying to show, horses evolved from some unknown animal.
Right.
From what we have, the first horse was close to a horse at least. And
Some
so
people might point to like small horses and stuff like that, but we got small horses today in the modern world. So
right.
it's not like the horses are required to be so big or something. You can have a variation of horse which is small.
But to say the best we have is horses, humans, and whales, and those are pathetic. And so what they're saying is we really have no transitional evidence that's significant and that's documented in evolution. That's what the one book you have, Fossil Forensics, show they admit basically the first bee was a bee, the first the first dog was a dog, a wolf actually, the first whatever. And so they admit over and over that they really don't have any evidence of transitional forms. And I quote extensively in that book from the evolutionists themselves. In fact, the response to that has been to call me names because they can't refute it. So if you look on Amazon, they've got about 60, I think, 60 or 70 reviews. Most are favorable, but the ones that are not favorable, basically, they call me names.
Right.
And they
Ad
try to
hominem
find
dice.
flaws in what I'm doing, but they don't find evidence. What they needed to do is say, Bergman's wrong. Here's the transitionals. There's 47 transitionals. Here you've got this animal. You've got this modern horse or whatever. You got all these transitional forms in between it, and they don't have that. And they admit that.
There's been evolutionists that have admitted this. Stephen Jay Gould admitted it. That's why he came up with his punctual equilibrium theory, is because, where they think, well, maybe there's no evidence of evolution because evolution happened all at once. Now a lot of evolutionists are trying to reject that because deep time is kind of a major icon of evolution. But in any given case, that he did it does show that he did admit that the transitional fossils was lacking. In addition to that, you also have Charles Darwin in his book. I actually got Charles Darwin's book over here, or both of them actually, right here.
Origin of Species, yeah.
Origin of Species
Descent
and
of Man, okay, yeah.
Descent of Man. And he actually admits in both of those books the fossil evidence lacking. He thought that the way that the whole evolutionary development happened, he said that it would pretty much move like plastic, because essentially he thought that there was no limit at all on variations, and he thought that would result in all life on Earth. And but he said that if this was the case, then you'd have to wonder, why is there no evidence for it being the case? So he just thought that maybe future evidence would help vindicate his case. And I guess that is the become the mantra of evolution. If we don't have it today, maybe one day we'll have it.
We'll have it, yeah. Right.
Off in the future somewhere. All right. It has been a pleasure, Dr. Bergman. I am so happy that you came up on my channel. I know it's been a long one. We had a lot to talk about today, and I know we had a bit of a late start, but that's okay. So is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to say to the audience before you have to go? Or
well, I hope they find this helpful. It's I've done quite a few of these Zoom meetings, so it's must be. In fact, several of my ones that I've done, I had several thousand that viewed it, so that's good. Check my website, crev.info, crev creation crevo.info, and so you can. I do about an article a week on there, so usually about 4 a month, and so gotten some good feedback from my articles, and they're easy to follow, and I write them so that they're accessible to lay people. And so if you like to read, there you go.
Awesome.
Give you time to read. So crev.info.
Awesome. And I will link your website as well in the description box, so everybody can be able to find it and click on it if they want to see more of your content, more of your books. Do you sell your books on your website, or you just...
No, I don't. I pretty much let Amazon sell them. I sell a lot from my house. I sell mostly when I go out and speak. I'll be in Chicago this weekend, and I'll be at 4 churches. And so in fact, the Midwest Creation Fellowship, I'll be at, I think Monday night. I forget. Well, I've got my schedule over here, but I'll be there. It's at the Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church in Antioch, Ohio. And I'll be there. In fact, if you call the church, they can probably tell you. I think at 7 o'clock we start. And so that's a good meeting. We have about 100 there. So that's a meeting been going there for the last 50 years. So they're a lot of material. It's a good group. And
right.
Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church is that. And it would be at, trying to think, let's see, the first day is Saturday, and then Sunday night, Monday night.
Awesome.
That's where I'm at there.
All right. Well, this has been great. I've learned a lot. It's been awesome having you on here. I hope I have you on here again, discussing possibly what they call vestigial, what they think is left over from evolutionary development. I would love to have you on there to have that discussion.
And pick up my book. That'll help you come up with some questions.
Right. And
Useless Organs is the one that I have now.
Okay. And I'm gonna send you my address for the ape and ancestors. Ape what's it called?
Apes as ancestors.
Apes as ancestors. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll send you my address through email, and we will talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good. Good talking to you today. Take care.
You too. God bless.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for joining me on Apologetics 101 for this incredible discussion about the fossil evidence, and I hope to see you next time. And I do plan on doing a response video, hopefully at some point, on Erica's response, Erica from Guts and Gibbons' response to me and Tompkins's interview on the 84% number. I'm putting together lots of different elements. I decided to do it differently than I was originally going to do it. Originally, I was going to do it like a point-by-point response. But anyway, I'm going to end up doing that. Instead, I'm going to do like various elements dealing with different arguments. I'm bringing in different people, and I'm going to show different clips of of my discussions with different people and that sort of thing. And I'm going to be dealing with different arguments that she raises up in that discussion, as well as in her original response. So it's going to be a 2-video response to Erica from Gutsy Gibbon, something I've never really done before, but it's going to be done on this channel. And so I plan on doing something really special with that. But in any given case, for right now, I'm glad to have the interview with Dr. Jerry Bergman. We discussed a lot. We covered a lot of ground on the fossil evidence. We covered Lucy. We covered issues involved with trying to make her out to be a bipedal creature when she's actually quadrupedal. And so it's been great having this discussion with Dr. Bergman. We also discussed other fossil finds such as Littlefoot, Dikika Child, Java Man, Neanderthals. We had an incredible discussion on these things, and so it's been awesome. I loved having an interview with Dr. Bergman. I'm hoping to have him back again to talk about vestigial organs. You know, what's considered to be vestigial by the standards that that evolutionists have set. We talked about that very briefly here, I think, but not a whole lot. So, but we talked about pseudogenes and junk DNA and that sort of thing, but we didn't really go too much into it as much as I would like, and so I'd like to bring them back and have a much deeper discussion about that. Next week, I'm also going to have Donnie from Standing for Truth Ministries come on, and we're going to be discussing did chromosome 2 fuse from 2 different chromosomes? Did chromosome 2 fusion happen? That's going to be the object of our discussion. And so join me for that. It's going to be great. We're going to be talking about a discovery that him and Christopher Root made concerning the genome. We're going to be discussing the evidence against chromosome 2 fusing together as evolutionists believe, as well as their assumptions about that and their evolutionary views on that, as well as some criticisms that have been made. I think Donnie also wants to discuss ERVs. I think he's going to be bringing a presentation as well. We'll see. Well, and that'll be next week. So join me on Apologetics 101. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please get subscribed. Don't forget to hit that like button, and make sure you hit that notification bell to be notified and alerted of all future videos that I'm going to have. I have a lot more videos planned up. So we're not even out of the woods yet on the evolutionary issue. There's all kinds of other videos that I want to have. I want to do videos on dinosaurs. I want to do some more stuff on fossils. I want to do one on alleged bird evolution. So, you know, that's being claimed and that sort of thing. So I've got a lot more in store. So please make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Don't forget to like the video. That helps get this information out there. All right. And again, thank you for joining me on Apologetics 101. And I will see you on the next one.